Good day, everyone. I am Shilome A. Diwata together with Mr. Biko, Miss Estacion, and Miss Romero, and today we will talk about Enscape exterior specialization. Before we start with our discussion, here is a brief introduction about Enscape. What is Enscape? Enscape is a real-time rendering and virtual reality plugin for Revit, Rhino, SketchUp, ArchiCAD, and Vectorworks. It is the only real-time rendering solution that plugs directly into the modeling software, giving users an integrated design and visualization workflow across all project phases. What it's used for. Enscape is a mission critical workflow solution that offers instant, high quality 3D renders at every stage of the design process. Perfect for daily design reviews, live demos, and final client presentations. It's perfect for companion for day-to-day design operations. Used as a real-time rendered viewport with bidirectional live sync. It includes real-time visualization, architectural visualization, virtual reality, design iteration and review, internal collaboration, quick rendering creation, and final presentation for clients. Why architects choose this software? Enscape allows users to work intuitively with accessible rendering that requires no prior specialized knowledge to use. They can design, document, and visualize simultaneously from one model. It is the easiest and fastest way to turn models into immersive 3D experiences. Here are some key benefits for users. First is real-time workflow. Next is 100% integration, user-friendly, effective iterations, then adjustable 3D asset collections, and lastly, variety of output modalities. Moving on, let's talk about the specifications. Here is the minimum specifications in order to run Enscape. First is Intel Arc A310 NVIDIA or AMD dedicated GPU with 4 GB VRAM that supports Vulkan 1.1. Next is NVIDIA GeForce GTX 10 series or Quadro P series and newer. Next is AMD Radeon RX 5000 series or equivalent to Radeon Pro series and newer. Lastly is 4 GB video RAM. Here is the recommended specifications in order to run Enscape. First is NVIDIA graphics chip or Vulkan 1.1 compatible GeForce GTX 900 series or Quadro M series or newer with the latest driver. Next is AMD graphics chip or Vulkan 1.1 compatible Radeon RX 400 series or equivalent to Radeon Pro series or newer with the latest driver. And lastly, GB video RAM 6 GB recommended minimum of 8 GB for VR.
So moving on, here is our workflow overview diagram of the project. The first stop of our process is the project setup and importing. Next up is the material and texture application. Sunod naman dyan is yung lighting setup. Then the camera and composition. Next up is the render settings, exporting, and then lastly is yung post-processing. So now we move to the second part of the workflow demonstration for Enscape. Dito ko ipapakita ang actual na proseso mula pag-import ng model hanggang final rendering. Our SketchUp model for this demo is a detailed 60 MB file. Kaya medyo mabigat siya, pero manageable pa rin siya for real-time visualization. So as you can see, medyo detailed ang components at maraming layers tayong ginamit. Even though the file is 60 MB, maayos pa rin ang performance dahil organized ang ating model. So to launch Enscape, I'll simply click the Enscape button sa toolbar. So you can see my cursor here, you can follow along na lang. Automatic siyang magre-render, mag-open ng real-time rendering software window since integrated si Enscape sa SketchUp. Walang export-export, diretso na siyang magre-render ng SKP file. So medyo matagal lang siya. So niloload ni Enscape yung ating geometry, yung materials, and yung scene data. And if you're using pala other softwares, Enscape also supports FBX, OBJ, and Collada formats. So yan, medyo matagal lang siya. So yan. So we can see here a multi-view. Pero to further modify pa, we can click on the maximize and minimize view. So just click on the Enscape icon and then we can see that it has already been multi-window. Pero kung gusto pa natin na i-modify siya na mas mapaliit yung Enscape and then you can freely work sa SketchUp, we can do this by clicking on the settings and then under preferences, we can check on the pin Enscape para hindi siya ma-minimize while we're working on SketchUp. So yan. So by this, kung may gusto kang i-edit, mas madali siyang gawin sa SketchUp kasi mas malaki yung view mo sa window ng SketchUp and hindi ka masyadong masisikipan. So yan, pwede ka na mag-work. So next is the material setup. So dito natin bibigyan na ng buhay ang ating SketchUp model. So in applying a material, we can do it here in SketchUp already. So we can click B or press B, then select the face, and then we can choose here sa ating tray kung anong material ng pwede. And then we can apply it na on the face. So to further modify yung ating materials, we can do it or we can do so na ma-edit siya here sa ating Enscape Material Editor. So what we can see here is that meron tayong different sliders to further modify or ma-alter natin yung properties ng ating material na ginamit. So we can, to further explain pa, for example, is this concrete na material sa ating fence, we can select B, press B and then Alt para mag-load yung material niya sa Enscape Material Editor. So we have image fade, so pwede nating i-alter yung kanyang image fade. So nakita natin na real time na nagbabago din yung texture niya dun sa Enscape. Yung bump map din, we can see here na meron tayong 3 different maps and we can choose from them. So we can do a negative height and kung gusto natin na mas bumpy yung material, we can add more bumpiness. So yeah. And also the roughness din. So yan, through Enscape Material Editor, we can edit the materials to further enhance yung kanilang So reminder lang, with a model this size, medyo mag-ingat din tayo sa sobrang high resolution na textures para hindi bumagal yung performance natin while rendering. So another important part of ng workflow natin is yung lighting setup. So unahin natin yung natural lighting or your day lighting. So by adjusting the time of the day slider, pwede nating makita ang effect ng morning, ng noon, and evening light kung gusto nating makita yung artificial lighting. So we can simply press U or I kung gusto nating i-rotate yung sun, or we can also um, press the shift key and then right click tayo and then drag, so we can slowly move the sun, yung rotation ng sun. Another thing is yung control U. Kung gusto nating makita yung pagbabago ng altitude ng sun or yung position ng sun, and then control I kung vice versa naman. So yan. We can also do this through sa Enscape na mismo. So Enscape has a view management. So to create views, so there is a also sliders na pwede nating i-change up yung altitude niya and yung rotation niya. Then we can create a new scene. So yan, we can create our views na din dito. So to enhance pa yung ating environment and yung renders, we can also add an HDRI environments. So we can click on the visual settings and then yung sa sky, and then we can locate that on the local file na napag-downloadan natin. So yan. So yan, we can wait for that habang naglo-load siya. So we can modify the sun until mag-blend siya dun sa HDRI natin. So yan. And then we can also rotate yung ating mismong HDRI environment. So konting modify lang ng sun. And then yan, mas better na siya and mas okay na siyang tingnan. So kung gusto naman natin magkaroon ng night renders and maglagay ng artificial lights, we can do that here in our SketchUp. So we can have a multi-window view. And then under this tab, yung add tab, Enscape objects, we can add lights. So in this scene, yung night scene natin, so medyo mabagal yung loading. Yun. Meron na tayong already na ginawang lights dito. So paano ba siya na-apply? So first, let's give an example here. We can do a spotlight. Spotlight ka dito. And then click here. Then double click. And then you can adjust the direction and yung span niya. And then yun, double click. And then you can adjust also yung luminous intensity niya. Kung gaano siya ka bright. And yung beam angle niya, kung gaano siya kalapad. So yun. You can see in our model na meron na tayong ilaw. To further modify this, we can apply a material here para mag-iba din yung kanyang kulay. So let's click B. And then under colors, kung gusto mo ng warmer lights, you can add yung mga yellow. So yan. Yan. Mas warmer na yung dating ng kulay ay ng ilaw natin. So yan. Another thing, kung gusto natin magkaroon ng ilaw other than Enscape objects, you can also do it in our materials mismo or yung geometry mismo. So, halimbawa, rectangle. You can adjust yung material niya mismo in our Enscape material editor. So, self-illuminating. Yan, nakita natin na self-illuminating. Luminance niya. And nag-ilaw din siya. So, we can also do this kung gusto nating maglagay ng ilaw. And modify yung color niya. Yan. Green. Gusto mo? Red. So, yun. Through this, we can add an artificial lighting sa ating models. So, another important workflow na ginagawa natin is the camera setup and composition. So, good composition makes a big difference sa presentation output natin. Now, for the camera setup, we can follow the rule of thirds or pwede din yung golden ratio. And we can also set up our camera in an aerial view or worm's eye view or a normal human's eye level view. So what we can try to do here is create a worm's eye view. For example, ganito. So yun. So medyo okay na siya, pero let's try to change things up with these camera settings. So we have here the exposure, the field of view, the depth of field, kung gano'n siya ka-blur, or kung may focus tayo na gusto nating i-highlight, we can change it and we can mapakita natin dito through depth of field. So yan, exposure, babaan natin. So medyo madilim, so let's lighten it up. And just light the field of view also. Kung gusto nating ma-zoom in and mas makapture yung model lang, can also do it. Pero medyo zoom masyado. So yan, also the depth of field. So medyo blurry na siya masyado, and we don't want that for this view. So we can try na babaan siya. So yan. So finally, for render settings and exporting, let's open the visual settings panel. Enscape offers different quality settings from draft, so iyan siya, for quick previews up to ultra for high quality renders. Despite our 60 MB model, smooth pa rin ang performance because the file is optimized. So, kung gusto mo yung hindi masyadong malag and mas smooth yung galaw mo sa Enscape, you can choose a draft for a rendering quality for the meantime. So, para kung may ine-edit ka, mas madali mo siyang magalaw and you can mas ma-visualize mo ng mas mabilis. So, you can work efficiently sa Enscape. So, for resolution naman, pwede tayong pumili ng 1024 or 4K or yung Ultra HD natin, depending on the purpose. So, kung for quick previews lang naman, you can lower down yung ating resolution para makita lang natin kung gaano siya, kung paano siya magmumukha on the final render. And for a final render naman, we can choose an Ultra HD para mas detailed and mas maganda yung final render natin. So, yan. For this image naman, we can check this. And then, we can also apply alpha channel para in our post-processing process, post-processing software na Photoshop, It can be a helpful tool para mas organized yung layers natin and mas madali tayong makakapag-edit ng rendered images natin. So yeah, that's it for our live demonstration.
Here is the workflow tips and best practices for Chaos Enscape. We have here 4 basic workflow tips. First one is file organization strategies. This in organization of tag and layers. This is the same important process to other rendering software there is. Layers and tags are the foundation when rendering areas or materials in your work. Same as your components because they are grouped and they will be affected as one. Here on the screen is an example of my cursor. It is hovered over my exterior walls. They are the ones that is highlighted and I made them a component back at my SketchUp. Next is manage camera views. Since SketchUp and Enscape are made by the same company, they are more in sync than other rendering software. As you can see in this panel, these are the scenes that I made back at my SketchUp. Dedicate assets folder in dedicating assets folder, you can save assets that is by Enscape or by importing your own file. By importing 3D models, it can help your render be more unique to yourself. Last is the custom file path. Here is the setup on how to create one. First is you have to create a new folder on wherever path you want to render or be saved. Then go back to Enscape and take a screenshot of your best angle. Then Enscape will ask you to which file it will be saved. Then you have to choose the file that you created. Second tip is save incremental versions of your render. Version history is located in your File Explorer, and it can be used as your safety net in case your laptop encounters errors. This is also important so that you can have an organized and recorded workflow. Rendering passes are not found in Enscape, unlike others rendering software. But rendering process is the process of rendering by shapes. For example, is the color and depth. Enscape, on the other hand, has Chaos AI Enhancer that can be used for image refinement and exporting high-quality images for videos or post-processing. Last tip is how to fix common errors. The first error in and the most common one that you might encounter is your laptop crashing or SketchUp is closing automatically when it just opened. On layman's term, it's called bug splat. It's because your SKP file is too big and your laptop is having a hard time processing and opening it. The best solution is to turn off layers that is not yet important to your scene or turning off profiles. Second error is opening Enscape. When the software is loading on your screen, it is important to not touch anything. Just let it load, most especially if your laptop or PC cannot multitask. Another another thing is Enscape will close automatically if your SketchUp closes. This is the process of enhancing your model through lighting. You can access the lighting settings through the visual settings at the upper right of your screen. Here, you'll find settings on how to change your natural and artificial lights. You can zoom into your screen if possible. The settings for natural and artificial light can be found on the Atmosphere tab. In changing your natural light, which is the light that is provided by the sun, you can use these keys showed on screen. On the first picture, under the natural lights, all of my natural light features are off. And below that is when they are on and set based on my liking. Feel free to explore your taste on the fog, sun brightness, and shadow sharpness. Below the artificial light, I have here a photo where the settings are off and on based on my liking also. If you're wondering on where you can put your lighting features, it can be applied on your SketchUp. Just find your Enscape plugins and there is your Enscape object. Then HDRI is what the background of the model will look like. This is found on the Sky tab. On the photo, I use the one that is made by Enscape. But you can upload your own background scene if you change your source into Skybox, and you can upload a Skybox file to use. Back to the Atmosphere tab is the shadow quality settings. This is where you will decide on how soft or sharp your shadow against your model will look like. This is your material setting. You can find Enscape Material Editor on back in your SketchUp from your Enscape plugins. Here you will be able to enhance how your material will appear on your render. You will first select your material by clicking Use Albedo. You will now use the material picker to choose which material you'll edit. It is more flexible to work with procedural textures than image textures because procedural textures can be edited and enhanced than image textures because image textures will appear as is. Lastly, the rendering quality settings can also be accessed on visual settings at your main tab. Feel free to explore, but on the screen you see that there are four rendering quality where you can choose from draft, medium, high, and ultra. Here we have optimization tips. You can pause to read other tips and information on how you can optimize your usage of Enscape is highly available on the internet if these ones are not for you.
Now that we have our render perspectives, they might need a bit of editing or enhancement, which is also known as the post-processing. Here we will be doing some cropping or like trimming the edges of the image, and also the important ones are the adjusting the brightness, contrast, shadows, and highlights of our image. We can make these edits through offline softwares like the Adobe Photoshop for complex compositing, which is not kind of a beginner friendly software, but we still have other options like Lightroom, so we can use the same filter edits on various images we have. Here's a free software, which is Krita. If you have minimal retouches, you may use it, and also Canva for quick basic photo edits. To give you some comparisons between the raw and edited file, I am using here Adobe Photoshop 2021. The prompts are listed below so you can follow where to find the settings I will be mentioning later. Here's a raw file image, and if you go to image, then adjustments, brightness, and contrast, curves, you can adjust them. For the contrast, I lessen it and the brightness was added to enlighten the image. Next to adjust is the curves for you to darken the light areas and to lighten the dark areas of the image. Another raw file for exposure and contrast. If you added more brightness and also the contrast a bit, and also I included the exposure and the gamma correction so it already looks like this, enhancing the brightness and color. I also included the curves by adjusting the red, green, and blue curves so it gave more color to the image, like its background that became more bluish. For the color correction, here is the image that was edited from exposure and contrast. Then when you go to image, adjustment, and then color balance, this is what it will show you. And here I lessen the redness to let the cyan color be more seen, and then lesser green for more pinkish, and blue to make it add some yellow shade. And it became like this, more realistic colors. And for the saturations adjustment, I added the saturation to let the color be more seen and lessen a bit of sunlightness. Same for this another example. It is not that obvious, but to compare it look better after the adjustments. For sharpening details, you can locate them to filter, then click sharpen and sharpen again. When you follow the prompt and click the sharpen filter, the image became clearer here. The image became clearer, giving sharpness to the whole image. Here on the next example, I applied the vignette on its edges. In applying vignette here in Adobe Photoshop, it is kind of complex because you have to add first a layer so you can move down the midstones to darken the image, then hold Ctrl and press I to invert the layer mask, and you will have to find a soft brush so you can have control on where to apply vignette on your image, and that's how its edges cut darken a bit. And now we're here in the atmospheric effects. You will find them from filter to render and then lens flare. Here we will add the lens flare. On this image we will add the filter. So you can also choose what kind of lens flare you want to use. Here I use the 105 mm prime as I think it will suit more on this image. This is the raw image file from earlier with no edits yet. Then I will show you the transition of raw files and the applied edits onto the image in the wideframe. From the brightness and contrast, then some curves adjustment, the color balance, saturation control, and vignette, and lastly, the lens flare. This has become the final enhancement of the image. These are the photos before applying some edits. And to compare, here are the edited images using Adobe Photoshop. And these are the other rendered perspectives that were rendered by our member Pico. After they were enhanced, the results became like this. They became lively and closer to reality. If you need to add more green for the grass, you can also do that. And also giving off a bluish night sky by fixing the blue shade.